and welcome. I'm Antonina Antosha, and you're watching Head to Head with uatv. Kyiv Smolyi has been appointed as the governor of the National Bank of Ukraine on Thursday, and the next day, Ukrainian Central Bank has already presented a strategy with clear vision on its major goals for a midterm period. What are these goals, and what will be the impact of such monetary policy on Ukrainian economy? To discuss this, we're joined in the studio today by Dmytro Boyarchuk, an economist and executive director of CASE Ukraine. Hello, Dmytro, and thank you for joining us.
Hello.
So why did our central bank get a new head?
Actually, because previous heads of the central bank decided to resign. Valeria Hontareva, she took governance of the central bank, of the national bank, for the hardest period. During the crisis period. She actually has completed quite difficult tasks. She was the person who allowed free float, introduced free float exchange rate regime. It was followed by a few waves of currency shocks, and for many people, for public, she is believed to be responsible for everything related to Hryvna instability. She also has completed, in my opinion, an excellent job cleaning banking system. It's a lot of critiques is around this, but it was crucial for sure. It was probably there were mistakes. Probably it could be arranged in a better way. But you know, previously banking system of Ukraine was not something what is believed to be a banking system. It was a system for cleaning money, for laundering money. But it was not a system for creating credits for the economy.
I would agree with you. I think that it takes a lot of stamina to take over such a huge institution as the central bank, to take governance and to actually rule it when the times are rough in the country itself. Now that the central bank has a new governor, what kind of expectations are there for Kyiv Smolyi?
Actually, the key expectation is that there will be no radical changes in the course of the national bank.
So basically, he is expected to continue the policy of Valeria Hontareva.
To continue the policy of inflation targeting, to continue the policy of tough supervision of the banking system, to continue the policy of free float exchange rates.
And what is the strategy that he had proposed already?
Actually,
what are the main peculiarities of the strategy?
The main peculiarities, you know, the main peculiarity of banking system is to sustain stability for the economy.
And what are the key tasks or maybe challenges that National Bank of Ukraine faces right now?
The key challenge is inflation targeting. You know, it's the most sophisticated tool of monetary policy you can imagine for the moment. And for mastering this tool, you need a developed financial system, and it takes quite a lot of time.
On what stage are we right now in the development of our financial system?
At the very initial stage. In many, you know, one of the key critiques for this inflation targeting is that, you know, National Bank changes policy rate, but it poorly affects any inflation tendency, because in Ukraine inflation tendency is totally dependent, for instance, on food prices. How can you...
Is it true, though? It is dependent on food prices.
It's true. Absolutely. And how can you how can you affect food prices, which are to large extent dependent on weather conditions with your policy rate.
Bread, for example.
So National Bank is just learning how to build this inflation targeting. Last year they actually missed their target. So it was initially not very ambitious target. But eventually, we have inflation more than 30%.
And what is the inflation rate right now in Ukraine?
Last month it was 0.9% monthly increase, but on year basis it's more than 14%. It's pretty much.
And once the inflation targeting strategy is implemented, what kind of figures are we expected to see?
In midterm, I mean in 2-3 years, we expect a kind of 5-6% inflation rate per year.
And in the long term?
I think in long term it still will be about 5%, because to have lower inflation, like 2%, like in developed countries, probably will have a bit different economic structure, and it will take much more time to have those changes.
What do you mean different economic structure?
I mean not dependent on resource prices that much. Like more advanced in technological issues, because the main shocks arrived to Ukraine. Actually, our main vulnerability is related to our dependence to resource prices.
Okay, how does our process of cooperating with international monetary institutions look like?
I would say the situation is not very good.
Why? Are we lagging behind on paying off our debts?
One of the key reasons, one of the main reasons, is the issue around anti-corruption court, because the IMF demands like guarantees of independence of anti-corruption court. The IMF insists that independent expert commission should be more influential when selecting judges for anti-corruption court. And President Poroshenko clearly stated he will not agree, and he said that it's not in line with constitution, with Ukrainian constitution. And also he hinted that even if it happens that the law will be approved in a version that IMF suggests, Constitutional Court will repeal this kind of law. And
and how much will Ukrainian economy suffer without this law?
For the moment, for the next 2 years, we are not in risk. We have growing debt payments, but they are not critical. We have enough gross international reserves to cover those debts. We have enough foreign currency to cover those debts. But after 2020, I'm afraid payment will be increasing drastically. And at this stage, put it different, at some stage we'll have to come to the IMF and to solve this issue. Are there any possibilities to solve the issue in a different way rather than having that law? I'm afraid not.
Okay. How can Ukraine maintain its own effective economy, and if Ukraine at all can maintain its own effective economy without any international reimbursement?
Developing competitive environment. And
meaning?
It includes also property right protection, which is also closely related to judicial system. One of the key reasons why the IMF insists on independent expert commission selecting judges is because of recent experience of judicial reform. For many judges, Ukrainian judges, independent expert commission, they actually released negative conclusion on them. And they advised not to pass them to this qualification committee. But despite those recommendations, judges have been appointed. And international donors, including the IMF, they actually understand that this might be the same story with anti-corruption court. And when we're talking about like being independent of the IMF money, It means that they will be replaced with private investments, with private funds. And private investments, they will be hardly arriving to Ukraine when people do not believe in judicial system, when you can be easily your property, your revenues could be overtaken by someone else after.
Well, basically raided.
Actually, yes.
Okay, well, you've just already mentioned that people in Ukraine do not really believe in the justice and the judiciary system. What about the financial system? Are people feeling the stable line in the financial system of Ukraine?
I would say that the situation with financial system is much better because, confidence improves, I would say, in 1-2 years from practice. If people see that banking system operates more or less stably, they start return their savings to the banking system. It's like a natural behavior.
So are you saying that the fact that people are taking out the money from the banks is due to the fact that a lot of banks have actually burst and not paid people back? Yeah. And that's why people lost their trust in the banking system?
Yeah. Usually it happens, when banks go bankrupt, people are scared, they withdraw what they can withdraw from the banking system. When business as usual returns, half a year, 2 years, and people just return to their normal life, they cannot keep for all the time their savings under the mattresses, so they usually bring them to the banks.
Okay. Could you at least try to give us an economic forecast for Ukraine for, let's say, at least next 5 or 10 years?
5 or 10 years?
Yeah. GDP growth, something like that.
I would say that with current stance, no real further reforms in terms of judicial system, we will be growing about, let's say, 2-4% per year. It will be our average growth rate, and I would not expect change in the structure of economy of GDP. If we will manage to pass this reform, judicial anti-corruption reform, and to persuade foreigners that we are finally crossed this line and we are moving in the right direction, I would say that our growth will speed up substantially, more than 5% per year. It's my view.
That's impressive. 5% per year. But do you think that the situation in the east of Ukraine, or the possible change in the situation in the east of Ukraine and with the annexed Crimea, could also change that forecast?
In what way it could change?
Well, for example, if the war is over, let's imagine that the war is over within next 3 years, would your forecast change? For investors, for the economy outlook of Ukraine?
For investors, I would say that judicial reform is much more important than the situation with Crimea and eastern Ukraine.
Okay, so our government should focus more on the implementing of reforms.
For investors, it's a priority.
All right, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for clarifying that issue for us and our audience. That was Dmytro Boyarchuk, Executive Director of CASE Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned with UATV.